Hi, this is AKSHAY GARKEL, partner and leader, Thornton, Bharat. The topic that I'm essentially going to speak for this session is on vision for security and technology risk management, which includes the key trends that we have seen so far and the predictions as well. The year 2020 and 2021 essentially has witnessed really complex and potent cyber attacks, especially at the time when we were going through very trying times during the COVID-19 surge. We've also seen that critical infrastructure, government, and health sector were overwhelmed given the high volumes of cases. The dependency on digital infrastructure actually increased multifold, and physical movement of people and goods had to really get restricted. The cyber posture of organizations also got really stretched to the maximum, with the hybrid model of working becoming the new norm with most of the organizations. It was likely that these trends are going to continue and get further complex, right? Given the global uncertainties in current times, which means that we have geopolitical tensions, we have economic crisis, we have the surge happening in different countries, and there are newer variants of the pandemic, essentially, which is looming large across multiple geographies. So, what are we really seeing today, right? From a digital perspective, from a cyber perspective, we are seeing that boards today of large organizations have started considering cyber as one of the top 3 risks affecting business, which is actually being expected to become the top risk. And the reason why I say that, because earlier cyber compromise to cyber postures used to lead to brand protection issues, the customer satisfaction issues, or even the sentiment in the market or the stock exchange. However, today with all the advanced solutions like IoT, AI, ML coming in, cyber has actually started affecting and impacting the way of life. If you look at, for example, compromise to a biomedical device can actually avert critical surgeries. In addition to that, we've also seen connected cars, right? A hack into a connected car can actually lead to a fatal accident, and so on and so forth. And based on which we see that today cyber is actually impacting lives. So, in addition to that, businesses are also transforming. The country is actually seeing the unicorn age. We are expecting about 200 odd unicorns basically getting added into our country based on certain fundings which are happening. When we see that business transformation is happening at a rapid pace, we've also seen business to customer models are actually moving towards digital to customer models. Financial companies are also transforming into technology companies by leveraging technology towards financial inclusion. We are also seeing that the regulatory obligations are getting further stringent and specific to each entity given the nature of their business. Mobile applications essentially have been ruling the roast, with apps catering to for almost all our daily needs. We've seen security considerations are turning all the more critical for applications which basically have a heavy use of APIs. APIs essentially for interconnections between other applications, interconnection between other businesses, interconnection between different models. Also basically looking at the payment ecosystem and how the applications essentially are integrating with the other payment ecosystem, again with the use of APIs. We are also seeing that cyber risk is not only associated to systems now or departments or even organizations, but it's actually very severe from a threat standpoint to nation states and human lives, and that is something that I had already spoken about. So, for example, we saw the Mumbai power grid issue, which is very common, the Stuxnet, Iran's nuclear power plant issue, which essentially, and then I gave an example of surgery in UK because of a compromise to a biomedical device was actually averted, and it was a very critical surgery. We've also seen that today cyber services across the world are growing at a rampant pace, given the demand for cutting edge solutions. And also expert advisory services across domains, right from governance to strategy to audits to looking at the vulnerability management postures, to looking at building crisis management plans, identity and access management solutions. Of course, cloud adoption is very high, and based on that, aligning with the right amount of security from a cloud security perspective, and of course, looking at business continuity and integrated compliance perspectives as well. Just to basically highlight some of the statistics that we've been seeing in terms of the global spend on cyber. We've seen that there has been a spend on information security, risk management technologies and services, which predominantly was predicted to grow by 12.4% and touched $150 billion US dollars in 2021. And if you look at the Indian cyber services market, that actually grew 2 times to from 2019 to 21. In 2019, it was $4.3 billion, and in 2021, this is $8.5 billion. These statistics essentially have been published in one of the reports issued by Data Security Council of India. So let's look at what are some of the challenges essentially that run across for security programs and risk management programs. We've seen political challenges, we've seen digital adoption as a challenge, and we've also seen organization culture, right? Now, let's go to political. From a political standpoint, we've seen the interventions or internal workings of the function. We've seen stringency on regulatory compliances. On the digital adoption, the challenges that we've seen essentially are the security metrics are not unified across the board. We've also seen a lack of, again, a well-defined security framework. And on the organization culture, we've seen certain challenges like, what are the priorities that are defined by the senior management of the organization? And of course, the resistance to change, where we always say that change is the only constant across any business. Now, let's look at some of the trends and the predictions, that effectively, impact the security posture of organizations. The times to come may only be prevalent and may even need even higher security controls to kind of, right? We've always seen we've seen organizations have declared perpetual work from home even in the future. And from that standpoint, a fair degree of distributed computing will be something that is going to kind of be more prevalent. We're going to look at endpoint security because today, the data essentially should become, device agnostic and device independent. So from that perspective as well, how do we apply the security controls at the endpoint so that there is no pilfer? There are remote employees who are essentially working on their own devices. And again, from that perspective, what are the security controls that organizations can really enforce onto the endpoint device? The next one is on automation. And we believe that automation is the key here. When you talk about automation, you talk about automation across security processes which have been defined across the organization. You also look at the testing methods on offensive and defensive, where organizations today embark on. This is a very common technique which has been used by most of the mature businesses today. And hence, it is very important to see how much of automation can you bring to bear. The next point is on data privacy and protection. It is important for organizations to understand what is the personal identifiable information that they are handling today, and at the same time, where all this information is flowing. As we all know, we are in the time of collaboration and less of competition. So from that standpoint, there are a lot of third-party ecosystem partners who basically handle the data. Either they process the data for various organizations. So there is a fair bit of chance that the personal identifiable information would be floating around. Hence, it is very important for businesses to kind of look at how their business processes are running, how do they capture the information. And if you look at the entire data life cycle, right from creation of the data to the handling of the data to actually deletion, archival, and destruction, it is very important to have a control over it. When I say control, it means that you need to understand where all information is essentially residing, and at the same time, who's got what level of control, and thereby also monitor what sort of accesses have been made to that information and what purposes. The next point is on threat to critical infrastructure, and I think this is a very pertinent point. When you talk about security considerations for large infrastructure assets, and then you talk about increased adoption of technology in critical processes. These are the 2 points that essentially will be important for organizations to embark on when it comes to the threats to critical infrastructure. Then, of course, we've seen some advanced solutions where organizations have already started embarking on the artificial intelligence, machine learning space, which is essentially going to be extremely important. Today, organizations have gone completely digital. They have gone into a lightweight model where they're kind of moving into the digital shelving space as well, especially when you look at some of the fintechs. So you look at some of the micro segmentation organizations and startups as well, some of the retail organizations too. Hence, more and more usage of AI ML is going to be the key. The next one is on supply chain, and today supply chain is a very, very big topic. And we've seen right from your distribution network to your inventory management network, or you basically look at your payment ecosystem partners, or essentially you look at any other models which essentially contribute to supply chain. Strongly believe that supply chain security is going to be the way forward. It is going to be very, very important to actually understand where all the data flows, what are the threats, and how do you basically go about protecting these threats. However, before even you talk about protection, I think profiling is going to be a very important topic. And from a profiling standpoint, how do I essentially profile my supply chain partners? How do I essentially when I'm running the predictive analysis, how do I basically fine tune my false positives? At the same time, all the assets which basically form a part of my supply chain, how am I going to make sure that I kind of secure them through a risk-based approach. The next one is on the regulations and compliances. Can be very, very sure that scrutinies are only going to increase, controls are only going to be tighter as we move forward. Now let's look at some of the other points. I think the another point is on the board and the organization perspective. It is very important to justify value to the board on security investments, and of course communicating the value of security to the end stakeholders. I think that's going to be very, very important. This trend has already started. In the beginning of my discussion, I mentioned that we're going to have the boards of organizations who have already started treating cyber as the top three risk. But again, won't be surprised if cyber becomes the top risk. Again, people, as we say that our security is as strong as our weakest chain, and I would say standards look at people as the weakest chain, and it is very important to kind of make sure that that weakness is kind of controlled. Hence, looking at more of litmus test in terms of testing the awareness levels of people, also looking at the skill levels of people. So more and more skilled professionals will be the need of the hour. Of course, insider threat is again a very big risk, and insider threat also has to be covered in terms of monitoring the activities of the people. Zero trust is another area where no accesses are given, and then essentially based on the layered approach, accesses are enabled. Access control is one area in the zero trust. Of course, the architecture, the architecture, the availability, the integrity, privacy, all of those aspects also have to be taken into consideration while building a zero trust environment. However, when we look at zero trust is something which is more of a concept and not a specific product or a framework alone, right? It's a thought process in terms of how do you invoke. It's basically a cultural perspective that you invoke into the organization. Of course, with some of the lessons learned through COVID pandemic in terms of the way businesses have realigned and re-engineered themselves, I think force majeure is another area which will be very, very important as a trend to be watched out for. Geopolitical tensions is another area. So from that perspective, any of the attacks which are state sponsored and very, very sophisticated also need to make sure that we have enough weaponry from a business standpoint. For example, we have seen today that in the wake of certain tensions between two countries, the cyber attack scenarios have only grown. Based on that, many businesses have actually become a part of a broadcast attack, and because of which, it was important for businesses to realign their line of defense, realign their strategy in terms of looking at the use cases, and then realign the strategy of actually going about identifying the nature of the attacks. So honeypots, offensive are some of the methods which potentially can help here. These are some of the trends that I discussed and I spoke about. Uh, Therefore, in summary, I would like to emphasize once again that the cyber threat landscape is ever expanding. We have organizations which kind of need to align their processes to global standards on cyber and, of course, the information security risk. Uh, the budget and the resource allocations, need to be revised and then accordingly prioritized. We've seen that cyber training of staff and education of user community needs more focus now. We've also understood that organizations need to devise a dedicated framework for cyber, which aligns right from the board to the endpoint, and of course instills a complete cyber awareness culture within the organization. With that, I would like to thank you for patiently hearing me, and thank you so much.
For more updates from CXO TV, please like and subscribe to our channel.